No witam. Ja jestem oczywiście GOLDZOR, a dzisiaj wspólnie zobaczymy i zareagujemy na całą meta-historię w Warzone, plus najbardziej zepsute bronie w Warzone. Coś takiego zobaczyłem ostatnio na YouTubie, został przygotowany dosyć fajny materiał na ten temat, także no zobaczmy, jak to ta meta w historii Warzone się układała. Link do oryginału oczywiście podrzucam w opisie, a i zobaczmy. Ja wydaje mi się, że pamiętam dosłownie wszystkie bronie z mety, ale będę szczery, jeżeli o czymś zapomniałem, od razu się do tego przyznam. Okej. Początek. Nikt nie wiedział czym grać. RPG.
MP5. Pretty sure I've said it a million times on the channel, but
Tak,
when I think of the
tak.
pandemic, I immediately think of Warzone, but more specifically, this state of the game. The M4 was a very dependable and forgiving gun that anyone could use,
Kurde,
and to this day
mało
remains
jest
a
tak
viable
przyjemnych
choice.
karabinów
Then you had a few different
szturmowych,
choices for snipers,
jak
which we haven't seen in
M4 z
Warzone
MW
since.
2019.
Mine and just about everyone's favorite was the Kar98K. It was super quick, had little bullet drop off, and one shot to the head still. If tactical long range sniping was more your thing, you could use the HDR or AX50 with the thermal sight, which
Ale szczerze mówiąc, nikt nie grał na początku Warzone Karem 98K. W sensie, no nikt, no ktoś tam grał, ale nie był tak spopularyzowany jak później. I uważam, że właśnie HDR plus AX50, którym ja sam grałem, były dużo częściej wybierane, bo się kojarzyły, wyglądały na takie snajperki dalekiego zasięgu.
just seemed to be a laser at launch. Also, the body damage was insane, which allowed you to
No i
one-shot
te
players who weren't
celowniki
even fully
termowizyjne.
plated without a
To był
headshot.
hit.
Then there was the Growl. I think everyone can agree that this was everyone's
Grał.
favorite meta AR. Throwing on the Archangel barrel, you have this beautiful iron sight that allowed you to forego any
Mówiłem o
optic,
tych
enabling you to keep
przyjemnych
this out to be
karabinach
absolute
szturmowych.
laser.
No
Not to
MW
mention, it's still pretty damn
2019
good today. I've seen
potrafiło
people make
potrafiło
videos
zrobić
about
te
using this in
przyjemne
Warzone
jarki, no
Pacific,
umówmy
it's
się.
still dominating.
Te
There's even a
jarka,
couple of weirdos who would run the double Growl class where they would have the one long range kitted out, but for your other one you turn into a nutty SMG that somehow also worked. However, if you weren't an absolute psychopath, you would pair this with the MP5, which would also be a viable option for the rest
MP5 na
of this
blisko,
game's
tak
life
jest.
cycle. But if you're a no good piece of shit like me, you paired this with an RPG that made for a great close range substitute because the one shot
Przyznać się, kto grał wtedy RPG-iem? Ja się przyznaję, nie grałem. Możecie mi nie wierzyć, ale naprawdę nie grałem. Grałem czymś innym, co było chyba jeszcze bardziej denerwujące niż RPG i dłużej w ogóle było w mecie, czyli C4, ale RPG-iem nie grałem.
radius on this thing was broken. Not to mention the vehicle destruction was awesome. A quick honorable mention goes out to the snake shots. Although they were very broken and possibly the most broken version of a shotgun Warzone has ever seen, they weren't near as viable because this is before Replay Violent or Resurgence in general had been released. And Verdansk being a long-range map, it wasn't near as common that you were super close like that in this state of
No
the game.
niby to była duża mapa, ale na blisko te snake shoty to było chore.
Just before the Cold War integration, where we saw guns such as the Origin 12 shotgun, the R9 shotgun, the AS Val, the M13, the Kilo 141,
AS Val,
the
Jezus.
Bruin LMG.
Ta broń
Not much to
była,
say about the shotguns other than
ta
they were
broń
pretty
w
broken with
połączeniu z
Dragon's
wykrywającymi,
Breath rounds and
pamiętam.
honestly just not fun to play
I te
against.
shotguny,
The AS Val
obrzydliwe.
had this bug with this
O,
bullet penetration that
właśnie.
allowed you to shoot through the entire map, and that
No
is
nie,
not
no
an
to było chore. No
exaggeration.
oczywiście tak się nie dało zabić.
But
Znaczy
even
no
after they
dało.
fixed the bullet penetration, it was
Jezus
still a
Maria.
really good gun. Honestly, was perfect to run with a sniper, specifically the Kar98K, because it acted as like a SMG AR.
Kolejny
hybrid
karabin
gun. Now I wanna
szturmowy,
go
nie?
ahead and
AS
lump
Val.
the Kilo and the M13 together because they
Jezu,
acted very
zapomniałem o
similar
Kilo
to me.
jeszcze.
They were both very accurate, but didn't deal the most damage, so you really had to hit your shots. A nice feature about the Kilo is that if you were an absolute sick bastard, you could throw on the monkey nuts on this John and treat it pretty much just like an LMG. But throughout all this chaos during the state of the game, the absolute most broken gun at the time was the Bruin. This was another one of those can't beat him, join him situations, since this gun was leaps and bounds ahead of everything else at the time. Nerfs eventually made this
Nie byłem
thing
jakimś
unusable,
fanem
which I
tego
think everyone
Bruena,
was happy
ale
with.
jak już
Now we have the
RKM-y to
Cold
wolę
War
takie.
integration
Wolę
era,
takie
which
niż
is
te
also
kloce,
about the
które
same
pewnie
time
tu
when
będą
Rebirth
potem.
Island got introduced, which
Najlepsza
not only changed
meta.
how the game was played,
To,
but
co było
obviously
przed
added
chwilą.
way
FFAR.
too many weapons into the mix. However, right
FFAR,
after Cold War
baby.
came out, the dominant ones were the FFAR, the Akimbo DMRs, the MAC-10, and most notably the DMR.
Nawet nie wiecie, ile bym dał, żeby raz jeszcze pobiegać z tym strafe speedem, z FFR-em, Karem 98K. Jezus Maria. Jakie to było wtedy piękne. Jeszcze był taki schemat do tego FFR-a. Taki jakby retro gierki, w sensie takie postacie z retro gier. O Jezu, przepiękna to była meta.
Aside from the FFAR, this may have been my least favorite state of the game. For starters, making all the Cold War guns meta is
DMR-ka.
a shameless attempt to get people to buy the game, but aside from that, the DMR Mac-10 combo was ridiculous. The DMR could shoot as fast as you could finger blast the trigger, and the Mac-10 had no recoil, a lot of damage, and a massive magazine. Absolutely no reason to not use this SMG. However, if the
trzeba było
Mac-10
grać
didn't do it for
DMR-ką
you, you
wtedy.
still had the
Nie
Kimbo
można było nią
DMRs,
nie
which
grać.
were a 3-round burst killing machine. Insane accuracy, a decent mag size,
O,
and
Kimbo
crazy damage
diamatki.
made this thing very, very
Jasne, że były
unfun to
mocne,
play
ale
against.
to bronia
However,
Kimbo
there
to
was a little
akurat ja
glimpse
nigdy
of
fanem
light
nie
during this
byłem.
dark meta with the FFAR. This FAMAS-like AR was a laser that was also really good at close range and was a perfect gun to
FFAR.
run with the sniper. Also have a universally loved
Yeah,
iron
you,
sight.
yeah, you,
This
yeah,
was
you.
another fan favorite, bringing a brand new gun known as the AMAX. This dominated this state of the game, but there were still other
Amaxik.
viable options such as the FARA. We even had a short period of time where we saw a burst meta with the Cold War M16 and the AUG. And to round things off, another broken pistol, which you could pretty much use as an SMG because of its insane
Sykov.
movement and its 80-round drum magazine known as the Psycom. Overall,
Ah,
not the worst
no
meta,
pamiętam,
since
jednak
the AMAX
pamiętam
was very
wszystko.
good, but actually required some recoil control by the player, which made it a high-risk, high-reward gun. And although the burst meta was broken and extremely
no,
annoying, it
Galil,
did last long
czyli
since it got hit
Amaxik.
with nerfs pretty fast.
Przepiękna,
Now we're
przepiękna
at the
meta.
time frame of about late spring of 2021 to the release of Vanguard, and here's where things get out of control with just an absolute hodgepodge of guns in that range. We have the MG82, Swiss K3, OTS-9, the Bullfrog randomly, XM4, Krieg 6, Cold War AK-47, and Cold War MP5. Honestly, I would say there's only a few guns worth breaking down here. The first being the MG82, which had absolutely no
Obrzydliwa broń.
recoil and a high capacity for its
Tragedia.
magazine. This made it
Znaczy,
a lot
takich
of fun to
RKM-ów
use
nie
and make
lubię,
big
nie?
team wipes at
Takie
range easier
kloce.
than ever. Then you had the Swiss K3,
1000
which
ammo.
was just as good, if not better, than the Kar 98 and made for a
No i
great
Swissik,
substitute.
nie?
It was honestly a lot of fun having two really good
Lepszy
bolt-action
był
rifles to
Kar,
choose from
ale
at the time.
przepiękny
Then
też
there
był
was the
Swiss.
XM4, which I'm pretty sure remained relevant for the rest of the game's life cycle. It was pretty much the M4 for Modern Warfare 2019, but just the Cold War version.
Tak, tylko
Not
trzeba
much to
było
say about
grać
this
z
meta other than
celownikiem
the
na
Swiss
tym
K
XM4.
being
No
introduced as
niestety
the
ten
most important
Iron
thing
Sight
going on
był
here.
średni, nie?
Now we have the Vanguard merge, which completely changed the entire game. The Vanguard
Owen,
guns, obviously we know, supported 10
Armaguerra,
attachments, and pretty much all of them were
Automaton.
broken. I know a lot of people love this state of the game, but me personally,
Niestety
I could
właśnie
not
te
stand it. The
RKM.
meta-defining guns at the time
Ale
were the
MP40 na
MP40,
blisko.
the Owen gun, the Bren LMG,
Ta,
the
ten
Cooper
Bren.
Carbine, the Well gun, the STG-44, and the PPSH. I
Ta.
kid you not, every gun on this list has zero
Wszystko
recoil.
mam
Like
w
I
głowie.
said, I personally
Wszystko mi się
started to take a
przypomina, jak
backseat around
zobaczyłem
this
te
game
bronie,
because I
nie?
just hated the Vanguard meta. Even though I owned the game, I had absolutely no desire
Nie
to
były
play
takie
it to
złe
level
te
up.
bronie z Vanguarda, w sensie nie
The
była
MP40
taka
Owen gun,
irytująca
PPSH,
ta
and
meta.
Wellgun were some of the most broken
Bardzo mi
SMGs
się
we've
podobała
ever seen
meta
in
na
Warzone. They all
Owena,
had insane
bo tylko
TTKs, and
ci lepsi
specifically
gracze
the
mogli
Owen
z niej
gun held its
korzystać.
own at mid-range with a 72
Bardzo
round
nie
magazine.
podobała mi się
Then you
meta
have
na
the
Brena.
Cooper, STG, and Bren, which again dominated every other gun from Cold War and
Cooper
Modern
też był
Warfare
spoko.
2019. If you weren't using any of the guns listed above during this time, you simply had no chance.
No i
I
ta
know a lot
pepesza
of
z
sweaty
zapalającą
Resurgence
pod
players
biodro
love this state of the
też
game,
była
but I
trochę
simply could not
serem.
get into it.
Trochę serek
Now
był,
we'll take
ale
like
generalnie
spring of
spoko.
2022 all the way up until the launch of Modern Warfare 2, which is honestly the same story as the last meta. Saw another Vanguard circle jerk of guns that included the Type 100, the NZ41,
Typ
the
100,
Mark 05,
piękna.
H4 Blixen, and UGM-8. Like I
Blixen.
said, these were all meta and overpowered, but definitely not near as toxic as the meta before this. Somewhere in this window, Fortune's Keep was
Ta,
released, which I think
NZ
Infinity
była
Ward
bardzo
wanted to
broken.
go away from
Bardzo
SMGs
mocna była
for a
ta
little
NZ,
bit,
też
enable them
pamiętam.
more like mid to
Marko
long range
5,
guns to
czy
have
jak to
some
się
time in the
nazywało.
spotlight. But around this time, like I said, this is about when I stopped playing the game or really caring, so I don't really have much to say about it, other than this is when COD really started to go downhill. Which brings me to the launch
Tak
of
było.
Warzone 2 in
Warzone
fall
2.
of 2022. The
Jezus
metas in
Maria,
Warzone
że my
2
przetrwaliśmy
honestly
ten
only
rok,
rolled
gdy
around a
graliśmy w
couple of
Warzone
guns at a
2.
time. It never was, like,
Dalej nie
super
dowierzam.
wide range. Like at launch we had
Pierwsza
the
meta,
RPK,
Fennec.
the TAC-V and the TAC-56. There
I
was
RPK.
seriously, like, no other guns.
Obrzydliwa meta.
While the RPK and Fennec were dominating everything and were very
Obrzydliwa
easy
meta.
to use, the TAC-V I would argue was much better, but just required a
TAC-V?
little more precision to use.
Fajne.
TAC-56 was also very user-friendly, and I think everyone just loves the iron sights on this. Of all the guns during this meta, though, the Fennec was definitely the most broken.
Nie,
If you had
Fennec
any
był
gun but the Fennec in a close
obrzydliwy.
range situation, you always died.
Nie dało
Fast
się
forward
uciec
a
po prostu
couple
od
months where we
Feneka.
had Resurgence introduced to Warzone 2, where once again we had a very
ISO.
narrow window
ISO
of
Hemlock.
guns to choose.
Let's
We
go.
had the RAL LMG, the Seiken LMG, the Hemlock AR, Vaznev SMG, and the Lockman sub.
Tak
You can
jest.
say what you want about Warzone 2, but I honestly love just about every meta this
Fajna.
game
Meta
had
z
to
ISO
offer.
była
The
fajna.
RAL was a textbook definition of this gun takes skill to use. You control the recoil and you're gonna do well, but most players could not do that because of how much recoil it had. Then you had the Hemlock, which was a very good AR, but only supported a 45 round magazine max to balance it out.
Wystarczająco,
Then the
45 było
Lockman sub and
wystarczająco.
Vaznev were both very fun to use, but even after nerfs still remained viable throughout Warzone 2's
Ta
entirety.
MP5 z Warzone 2 też była
Now, I'm just
spoko.
gonna cover the rest of the game's life cycle, which
Kronen.
to me, honestly, we didn't really see anything too crazy in the meta besides like two really standout guns to me. Starting off with the Kronen Squall,
Nie wiem, czy
yet another one of my
pamiętacie,
favorite metas because it was a
Kronenem na
high
początku
recoil
się
damage
grało
gun
na
that I
single
think
tapie,
rewarded
nie?
good
Że się
players.
pojedynczo
You pair
strzelało.
that with the ISO SMG,
To wtedy
you were
był...
unstoppable. After a
No,
nerf to that, we saw the
no nie
Lockman
byłem zadowolony.
556, which people were calling the Grau 2.0 because of its zero recoil build.
Ale ten
Once that was
Kronen
nerfed, we kinda
na
entered
full
this
auto
weird
był już
state of the
spoko.
game where you could really use anything, but I would say most
No i
people were
Kastowik
using the Cast
762,
762,
najlepsza meta z Warzone 2
AK,
na daleko
AK-47.
zdecydowanie.
I really couldn't tell you exactly what the meta was from Summer 22
Zawsze
all the way
chciałem,
up
żeby
until Warzone 3.
AK-47 było w mecie, no
So now
tutaj
that brings us to
teoretycznie
modern day where
coś
we're playing
podobnego było.
Warzone 3 on Urzikstan. And honestly, there's a lot of guns in the meta right now as we approach the Season 1 Reloaded update, which I'm sure is about to change. We're probably going to get some crazy nerfs here first.
A,
But
to już
these are the guns that we
Urzykistan.
have right now. The MTZ Interceptor, Polymont LMG, Bass B Battle Rifle, WSP Swarm, WSP-9, Striker, Ram 7, and the MTZ 762. With a lot to choose from right now, I think most would agree that
Nie
the
są złe,
Interceptor,
nie są
Polymont,
złe te
and
mety
Swarm
w
are at
tym
the forefront.
Warzone
The
3.
Interceptor has already seen a nerf, but it's still
Chociaż,
broken. I mean,
no,
all they really changed was that it can't two-tap anymore.
z perspektywy
instead of
czasu
just
ta
retap, which is
MTZ
still
Interceptor,
ridiculous.
nie?
The Swarm shreds at close range, and the Polymont has an insane
nie jest nic
mobility
przyjemnego,
and accuracy
no.
with the conversion kit.
Nie było,
However,
no,
the other
bo
two SMGs
to
offer a
już nie
little bit
jest.
more options at mid-range, which I
Po
think
prostu
are better
dobre.
with the Interceptor. And you also have the Bass B, which has also seen a nerf already, but this thing is also still ridiculous. Maybe not at long range, but at mid to close, this also makes a great pair for the Interceptor or the Cat AMR.
No i te pompy,
which I would
nie?
also
To
go
mnie
ahead and
boli,
throw in the meta since
że
it's
te
the only
pompy
sniper
niestety
that will
są
guarantee
strasznie
one shot
mocne.
to the head, even without explosive ammo. Just a few honorable mentions I'd like to go over with is the
Ooh.
snake shots, which I
Ładny
kid you
klip.
not, were only in the game for like 48 hours. Honestly, really crazy
Ta,
how
były
fast
snake
Infinity
shoty,
Ward
ale
got these out of the game.
to
And
faktycznie bardzo
similarly, the
krótko, nie?
Lockwood 300 somehow through all the
No właśnie,
patches
te
got
shotguny,
reverted
nie?
to
No
broken
to
Warzone 2
nigdy tego nie
snake,
zrozumiem,
which
czemu oni
has
robią te
insane
shotguny
range
takie
of
mocne, bo
one-taps
to
also. But that is the entire Warzone meta history
zawsze
in
będzie
one video. Like I said, I
niezbalansowane,
didn't cover
nie?
everything, but I really just wanted to
No nie
highlight
mogą
those
być niestety
meta-defining
shotguny
guns
takie
that were
mocne.
dominating the game at whatever time period it was. But let me know what your favorite meta was down
Interceptor.
below, or your least favorite. I know I'll probably put out a video of like my personal favorite and what the ones I hated the most as well. But if you liked, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a...
Dobra, to była, moi drodzy, cała meta. Teraz, moi drodzy, najbardziej zepsute bronie w historii Warzone. I tutaj już będzie grubo. Tutaj już naprawdę będzie grubo. Bo tu będą nawet rzeczy, które były dostępne przez kilka godzin, ale były totalnie popsute. Także być może o wielu nie wiecie, jeżeli nie byliście stałymi bywalcami Warzone. Yeah, let's go! Marzec 2020. A, snake shoty. No już widzieliśmy. Syf, absolutny syf.
Meta in every iteration of Warzone at some point or another. They always find a way to mess up the snake shot ammo to just be insane with the damage range. Somehow ends up always being better than any shotgun in the game, which is just wild. Add the fact that they're semi-automatic, akimbo, and have wild hipfire accuracy, and you've got one of the most broken guns we've ever seen in Warzone.
Ta.
Now, a season or two later comes a couple of patches, which always
To
brings
był
a
hit.
handful of nerfs and buffs. One of
Ale
which
to
was
było
the
dostępne
FAMAS, which
tylko
was
chyba
pretty much useless in
24
Warzone up
godziny.
until this point. They decided to buff
Nawet
the
nagrałem
damage
materiał
range
z tego.
amongst some other things. However, within this
Dosłownie
buff,
zabijałeś
somehow
na
the
one shota
underbarrel shotgun, specifically
do
for FAMAS, got
5
caught in
metrów z tej
crossfire,
broni, nie?
no pun intended, and resulted in one of the
Odwieszana
craziest
strzelba na
textbooks we've ever
FAMASie,
seen
nie?
in Warzone.
Odwieszana
The
strzelba
was a
na FAMASie, no.
one-shot kill at a
Jak to
pretty
brzmi w
considerable
ogóle?
distance, which no other shotgun was capable at this point. If your first shot didn't down them, it really didn't even matter because the fire rate and the hip fire accuracy was also really good on this. But I would say the craziest thing about this is that it didn't even take up a weapon slot since it was an attachment. So you still had a fully functioning FAMAS for your mid-range engagements, which wasn't anything crazy, but was still pretty dang good. Then you had probably the Kar 98 as your secondary, and you recovered at all ranges. This was one of those things that did not last long at all and was a complete mistake that
Ta, to
slipped
było
through the cracks
24
and probably
godziny.
resulted in somebody getting fired.
Wiele osób mogło w ogóle tego nie
New
doświadczyć,
season
jeżeli
means new
akurat
guns,
wtedy
and
nie
in
grało.
season 6 we got the AS
O,
Val, which
AS
is a
Val
fun
i
concept,
strzelanie
kinda
przez
like
ściany.
an AR
To
SMG
było...
hybrid type, but with that also brought a 10-round
To było
magazine
trochę
that buffed the
dłużej.
bullet penetration.
Po kilka dni spokojnie. Nie wiem w ogóle jak to przeszło testy, w sensie no już chyba udowodnili nam deweloperzy, że często nie ma testów niczego. Ale to było chore. To zepsuło w ogóle multiplayera. W sensie Warzone to jedno, ale w multi się nie dało grać, nie? Multi się nie dało grać. Ginąłeś na kulkę, na dwie kulki wszędzie. I wszędzie latały te wykrywające gówna, nie?
There were also some absolute sick troglodytes who would run this with an M4 underbarrel like snapshot grenade launcher, which I didn't even know existed.
Ta, ludzie
until
grali
this
jakimiś
point. And if you shot this
podwieszanymi, właśnie
underbarrel
wykrywając.
outside a
No
building,
nie,
it
no
would
to
ping
był absurd.
everybody inside, and then you
To
just
naprawdę
switched to
było
AS Val
chyba...
and laced every single
To najbardziej
person with
zepsuło
these.
wtedy
You were
Warzone.
seriously never safe no matter what. What I liked about how they handled the nerf was they got rid of the bullet penetration buff that still made it a really viable gun, which is always fun to see because it ended up being like a pretty fun gun to use after this.
Ogólnie AS Val pomimo naprawienia tego dalej był potem bardzo dobrą bronią, nie? Na blisko.
Because you would just get laced through walls every time you respawn, especially if you were playing shipment. Seriously, just a wild time to be playing the game. Crazy
Kwiecień
thing about the
2020.
SPR is that it also launched with Season 6, alongside the AS Val. That means everything I'm
Co
about to
powiedziałem?
mention
Kwiecień?
coexisted with
Październik.
everything I just talked about with the AS Val. Everyone loves a new sniper, so when the SPR dropped, everyone was pretty hyped. One shots to the head and has pretty quick mobility, which was looking to compete with the
No,
Kar98, which everybody
SPR-ka
already
była
loved.
po
But
prostu
let me tell you,
hitscanem,
this was
więc...
a Kar98 murderer.
Nieważne
Said all
jaka
the perks
była
of the
odległość,
Kar98, but
gdzie
the only
celujecie,
difference was the
od
damn
razu,
thing was
gdy
hit
tylko
scan. For those that
kliknęliście
don't know what
strzał,
hit scan is, it's when the bullet of the gun is a
być
laser
piłka.
and essentially
Kula
doesn't
wlatywała w
really exist
chłopa,
in
nie?
real time. Teleports across the entire map immediately,
Także
which means
wystarczyło
no
tylko
bullet drop and no
nacelować i
bullet time.
kliknąć.
So when a gun's
I
velocity
100%
is
macie od
infinite
razu
and
fraga,
also
nie?
one shots to the head, it
Także
causes a
wyobraźcie
lot
to
of
sobie na
imbalance.
karabinie
Also rewards a lot of
snajperskim.
people who have no idea how to
SPR-ka.
snipe. I mean, seriously, hitting 300 plus meter snipes was just like a breeze.
Ta,
The
to było...
game honestly kind of turned into CSGO for a minute, since it was just like all you had to do was aim for the head, no matter like how far away they were, which was just really,
Ta,
really,
to było
really
crazy.
broken and annoying.
Naprawdę
I don't
było
hate the
crazy.
idea of a hit scan sniper, but just make it not one shot. Kind of like Warzone 2. That was the whole thing with Warzone 2. They were really easy to use. They just wouldn't one shot, but whatever. And looking back at it, this may have been the most unstable state of the game when you think of this existing simultaneously with the AS Val. There's
Tak,
also a theory
jeszcze
that they
wtedy
purposely make the new
dosłownie
guns
był
more
AS Val,
broken,
ten
so it,
zepsuty
like,
AS
drives
Val,
the
nie?
Battle Pass sales, but I don't know. But Season 6, you're looking really sus.
Styczeń 2022. Ojeju. Tego nie pamiętałem. Tego nie pamiętałem totalnie. Ale tak. Akimbo syfy,
These
nie?
were pretty much the same as the snake shots, but the only difference is that they only hold 2 shots in each shotgun. They hit just as hard, if not harder, and were being completely abused since this was at the height of the Rebirth craze. And obviously we know Rebirth is a very close quarters map, so this is just what everybody was running, and it was just kind of like who would get the first shot off. That's all it was. Not even about aim, really. You think only having 2 rounds would make it at least a little better if you were on the receiving end, but that didn't even matter since it took like 2 seconds to reload. Also, if there was an award for the ugliest looking gun on this list, this would for sure take the cake. I mean, I get that the scope helped with the
No,
range,
obrzydliwe to
but
było.
seriously, like, what the hell is this? For the remainder of Warzone 1's life cycle, there wouldn't be anything too game-breaking other than like all the ridiculous Vanguard guns being very easy to use. Which brings us to the launch of Warzone 2, where the Akimbo P890s were like the best close-range option in the entire game. If you haven't noticed
niestety,
by now, there's kind of
ogólnie
a
jest,
trend here with
nie wiem czy zauważyliście pewną zależność, ale zazwyczaj jak jest cokolwiek akimbo, cokolwiek z shotgunem, to nigdy to nie jest przyjemna meta, nie? No nigdy, no.
This resulted in you being able to one-shot anyone who was fully plated as long as you hit both shots in the head, which mind you, that wasn't even possible for snipers at this point in the game, which was crazy. But even if you didn't hit a headshot, it still only took 2 shots, which was just like super broken. With the crazy rate of fire and also like insane hipfire accuracy, this was ruining endgames left and right. The amount of people who would run Riot Shield and just rush your building with confidence because all they had to do was just spam left and right trigger was so stupid. Thank goodness Resurgence wasn't in the game yet, because this would have been extremely annoying. Remember when I said at the launch of Warzone 2 there wasn't a sniper that could one-shot? Well, that was actually kind of why. The new Victus XMR at the time
To
had
nie
a
było
bug with
broken.
explosive ammo. It could one shot. Now I don't really consider this broken
się,
at all, but
okej.
I thought it was worth
No
mentioning.
właśnie,
since
sam
technically
powiedział, że
it
to nie
wasn't
było broken.
functioning how the developers wanted
Czemu
it
to się
to.
tu
Like,
pojawiło?
they were super duper anti one shot headshots. We can also sprinkle in the fact that a few months later the incendiary ammo would also get bugged into allowing a one shot with certain snipers, which again I don't
to nie
think
było
is
takie
broken
broken, w sensie,
whatsoever,
no-
but definitely not what they had in mind.
No
Also,
bez
for fun,
porównania
let's
z tymi
go ahead
innymi
and mention
rzeczami,
the
nie?
St. Patrick's
Innymi
Day
broniami.
sniper. This was not a bug.
Totalnie
This
bez
was fully
porównania.
intended.
O
3 months that
Jezu.
they would add a Doom bundle, which was actually a pretty
Najgorsze
awesome
było to,
blueprint
że
that
to było
introduced,
wszystko
like, the dual
zaplanowana
trigger. The
akcja,
dual
nie?
trigger would fire both shells at
Dodali
once,
ten
which resulted in a
zajebisty
one-shot
bundle,
down, but also,
w
like, up to
kolaboracji
15
z
meters.
Doom.
Of all the guns on this list,
I
minus
oczywiście
the
ten
one-shot
shotgun
sniper
musiał
explosive
akurat
ammo in Warzone
przypadkowo
2, I
zostać
think this
zepsuty.
is like the one I could tolerate the most. I don't really mind this shotgun being a one-shot since you had to reload between shots, so if you missed your first shot, you were probably gonna die. The only like really game-breaking aspect of it was the range was just super ridiculous. Don't get me wrong, it was still very annoying to die before you even realized you were being shot, so I'm definitely not saying it should have stayed in the game. I'm just saying if a shotgun's gonna one-shot, this is the way to do it. Pretty much swing for the fences. If you miss, you're gonna die. If you hit your shot, great. Now we're at the launch of Warzone 3, where all the patches,
No i
nerfs,
znowu
and
ten
buffs,
shotgun,
and like
nie?
new guns being implemented resulted in the Lockwood getting
Właśnie o
reverted
tym
back to the
mówię, no
one-shot
zawsze te
crazy
shotguny
range that
i
we were
tak
just
imbo to
talking
jest
about. And the
tragedia,
tier
no.
pistol, which was Modern Warfare 3's revolver, had its snake shot ammo bug to one-shot at crazy ranges
Zawsze.
too. I mean, at this point we're kind of just beating a
Dajcie
dead
mi
horse,
przykład
but, I mean, no,
jakiś
it was just,
akimbo
like,
albo
super
shotgun
stupid. I
mety,
had
która
no
była
idea
spoko,
how this
albo nie
makes it
była po
back to
prostu
the game, especially
irytująca.
when it was just in the game,
Może
like,
tak, bo to,
last
że była
month.
spoko dla
Even
tych,
with
którzy
all that had
abuzowali,
happened
to
leading
jedno,
up to
ale
this,
że nie
you'd
była
think they would learn
irytująca.
a thing or two about balancing shotguns. That obviously just doesn't seem like a priority to them. The only saving grace about this was that they were both vaulted out of the game entirely only a few days after launch, so it didn't last long whatsoever. However, I do think it's worth mentioning that in Season 1 Reloaded, they did bring back the dual trigger for the Lockwood 300, and they said it was fixed, but it just wasn't. Literally the exact same gun that it was a month prior. I don't know what they were doing in the downtime. But obviously, this resulted in it being vaulted again, and now I don't even think it's in the game right now, if I'm being honest. But that is the entire history of broken guns in Warzone.
Fajnie było sobie to przypomnieć. Dajcie znać w takim razie, na sam koniec, jaka była wasza ulubiona meta i jaka była najbardziej znienawidzona meta w historii Warzone. Jeżeli gracie od niedawna, też możecie dać znać, bo już pewnie przez kilka met przebrnęliście. Także chętnie poczytam komentarze. Linki do oryginałów podsyłam oczywiście w opisie. A ja wam dziękuję za uwagę i do następnego. Mówi GOLDZOR, na razie.